Hello, how are you? Today we're going to look at the weirdest facts you never knew. Prepare to delve into a dark and surprising past where practices that seem unthinkable today were commonplace. Imagine a time when there were human zoos, where people were displayed as attractions, or when it was possible to send children through the mail. But does not stop there. Habits that have changed drastically also include smoking on planes and medical treatments with cocaine. This is just a glimpse into a bizarre and unsettling past that seems more like a nightmare than reality. In 10th we have outdoor baby cages. In the 1930s, families in the United Kingdom adopted a habit that today seems completely absurd, placing babies in cages hanging outside their homes. This practice was inspired by pediatrician Luther Emmett Holt, who believed that babies needed fresh air even when their parents were busy. The idea emerged as a solution to the lack of green areas and high pollution in cities. The intention was good, as it aimed to improve the health of babies. However, despite the possible benefits, the risks involved, such as falls or even kidnapping, soon caused this practice to be abandoned and relegated to the past. In 9th we have smoking on planes. In the past, smoking on planes was a fairly common habit that many people still remember. Initially, the smoking ban began on short flights, lasting less than an hour, as recorded in a 1997 Folha de São Paulo report. Gradually, this ban expanded and nowadays smoking is completely prohibited on any flight, regardless of duration. Even with the ban in force, it is still possible to find traces of this ancient practice. On some planes, it's common to see ashtrays in the bathrooms or even on the seats, a reminder of the times when smoking on board was permitted. In 8th we have collection of human body parts. Nowadays, the idea of collecting human body parts seems absolutely absurd and horrible. However, there was a time when this macabre practice was relatively common, especially during the period of the two world wars. Soldiers often carried skulls and other body parts of defeated enemies as trophies, a grim way of demonstrating their triumph and bravery. This morbid hobby reflected the brutality and dehumanization prevalent during armed conflicts, where human life often lost its value and respect for the opponent's dignity was forgotten. It is shocking to think that such practices were accepted and even encouraged in some military circles. Fortunately, this habit is no longer common these days. Society has evolved, and the ethical and moral norms that govern human behavior have become more rigorous. Today, the harvesting of human body parts is considered not only illegal, but also deeply immoral and disrespectful. This change reflects significant progress in valuing human life and respecting the rights and dignity of all people, regardless of circumstances. In 7th we have children sent by mail. At the beginning of the 20th century, in the United States, there was a curious and today unthinkable practice: sending children by mail. This method of transportation allowed minors to travel across the country under the supervision of a postal employee. At that time, this option was very attractive to those responsible, as the costs were significantly lower than those of a plane ticket. Historical records show that sending a child cost just a few cents, making it an economical alternative for families. However, over time, this practice began to be abandoned and is currently considered illegal in many countries. In sexto we have very violent punishments. Throughout history, humanity has stood out for creating extremely violent and humiliating punishments. Some of these punishments have become well known, such as incineration. These practices reflect a period in which cruelty was used as a means of control and repression. Nowadays, with advances in discussions on human rights, this type of punishment is widely considered inappropriate and unacceptable in most places. However, there are still countries, such as Saudi Arabia and Brunei, where violent punishments are used as a form of repression. In 5th we have cocaine treatments. Many may think that cocaine has always been seen as an extremely harmful drug, but this has not always been true. In the past, the substance was considered useful by the medical and scientific community. Cocaine was widely promoted as an effective solution for coughs and headaches. Some advertisements at the time even used images of children to promote cocaine-based products. Today, these treatments have been completely discontinued, reflecting a significant change in understanding of the drug's harmful effects. Fourth, we have recreational visits in psychiatric hospitals. In the past, psychiatric hospitals were bizarre environments, marked not only by extremely violent treatments, but also by a very peculiar practice, recreational visits. In some cases, including in Brazil, these places were seen as entertainment spaces where visitors paid a kind of entrance fee to have fun with patients. These visits not only exposed the sick to inhumane exploitation, but also contributed to the stigmatization and dehumanization of those suffering from mental illnesses. Fortunately, with advancing understanding of mental health and patients' rights, such degrading practices have gradually been abandoned. Thirdly, we have lack of hygiene. Certainly, nowadays there are still people who do not take adequate care of their hygiene. However, in the past, this lack of care was much more prevalent. During the Renaissance, a mistaken idea began to spread: the belief that bathing frequently could be harmful to health. Therefore, at that time, people began to limit their body hygiene, only washing their hands and face with some frequency. To disguise the body odor resulting from this lack of bathing, many resorted to a profusion of perfumes and fragrances. This practice not only reflected a limited understanding of hygiene, but also contributed to the spread of disease and worsened health problems. Fortunately, with the advancement of science and awareness of the importance of hygiene, this mentality has gradually been overcome. Second, we have human zoos. This is one of the most shameful passages in the history of humanity. At the height of European colonization in Africa and Asia during the 20th century, children and adults were uprooted from their homelands and taken to countries on the old continent. There, they were exposed as if they were another species, in an inhumane and degrading practice. According to the BBC, these locations existed in Europe until 1958. Fortunately, nowadays, this atrocity is not even considered, and humanity has advanced in the fight against racism and for the dignity of all people. First, we have radioactive toys. In the 1950s, amid the tension of the Cold War and the end of World War II, radioactivity was at the center of global discussions. However, the phenomenon was not yet fully understood, and the associated risks were little known. In this context, children's toys containing substances such as uranium were sold. Nowadays, this would be unthinkable, as we know that such materials are extremely harmful to the health of children and their families. Fortunately, with the advancement of scientific knowledge, such dangerous practices were abandoned. And this was the video. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like.